The only reason I'm doing the 90 days is because I did the 30 days. The exercise and stuff, get to the 5K. You got to do the 10. You have to commit to the promise you've made to yourself. Put that bet on with your partner or your friend around sticking to that commitment.
Why would you go to a meeting for the rest of your life and the first thing you say is, hi, my name's Laban and I'm an alcoholic? You're not. What you can do, and you can get a swear jar at home, instead of putting money in for profanity, you put it in for negative self-talk.
If you could give our listeners a challenge for the next 30 days to make a change in their life, to get the courage to start making things happen, what would that be?
Time to get fired up. Yeah, I'm getting fired up.
Your thoughts can become plans. Plans can become actions. And actions become a reality. We share powerful stories and simple steps to fast track your business and personal growth. Are you ready to make it happen? Let's get fired up. So Laban, we're going to get into a bit later on, a bit deeper into the book. You've done some crazy shit. Both alcohol fueled and drug fueled, but also when you went through the transformation, we're reading in your book how the short run led into the 7K, which led into this, and the speed in which you went from 0 to ultra was crazy in my point of view. And I'm keen to kind of understand how you did that, why you did that, and what it looks like today. But another thing I've picked up along the way is the Laban self-declaration. And I want you to share that with us, but also tell us why that's important for people, just any average person. Like, why do we need that self-declaration? How does that kind of drive you?
So what Ben's referring to, folks, is this declaration of being the world's best courage coach. And if you're in America, it's courage. Because if you say that over there, they go, carriage? Like, I didn't know you owned horses. And what that is a declaration of how I choose to show up in the world, which came about from a conversation that I had with an incredible man a couple of years ago. And I'd been told about this guy, Steve Hardison, who's known as the ultimate coach. He's a Mormon guy out of Arizona and one of the most charismatic people I've ever met in my entire life. But I heard about this guy and he was an enigma at that point. Like, he'd never done any interviews. Like, there was no book about him. And he had coached some really amazing people. He had worked with Byron Katie for a long time and CEOs of billion-dollar businesses, and Tony Robbins' ex-wife, Becky Robbins. But he also had Oprah Winfrey's coach, Iyanla Vanzant. And this video that existed, if you get on YouTube and you just put in TBO LIT NFL, just those letters, and I watched this 2-hour, 10-minute presentation that he gave a few years ago, and I was so moved by the Steve Hardison guy that I was like, I need to speak to him to see if he's the real deal. Because there's lots of people out there there's plenty of fake gurus and this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I use my resources, because I'm world class at getting phone numbers and cold calling people. So I just implement that, and I ring Steve, and he picks up the phone and says, "This is Steve." And I go, "Steve Hardison?" He goes, "Yes, it is." I go, "Steve Hardison, it's Laban Ditchburn from Melbourne, Australia." He goes, "Laban, so great to hear from you. I've been waiting for this call all my life." I'd never spoken to the guy before. And I said, "Steve," like, what a response. And bear in mind, to work with this guy is $200,000 for 50 hours coaching. You have to fly to his home in Mesa in Arizona. So people fly in from Australia and China and England like every 2 weeks to go and coach with this guy. And I knew that this guy was incredibly financially successful. He'd been married for like 40 years. Like, he had everything. And I just said, "Steve, I just watched this video about TBO, LIT, NFL, which will make sense once you get on there. And I just wanted to ask you one very specific question." And he said, "What is it, Laban?" I said, "What do you need help with?" Because I had nothing else to offer him. So I was like, "What do you need?" He goes, "Laban, I want to acknowledge you for asking me that question." He goes, "You know what? I'm 64 years old. I'm 8% body fat. I got the love of a beautiful woman. I got everything a man could ever want, but I really want to thank you for asking me that question." And I said, no worries, Steve, you're welcome. I said, are you still not doing interviews and podcasts and that kind of thing? He goes, that's right. I go, oh, no worries. I said, the reason I ask is I'm a speaker, I'm a coach. I've got this amazing podcast series called Become Your Own Superhero, and I'm well on my way to being known as the world's most positively influential speaker, which was my mantra at the time, right? But someone that I revere and admire recently said, Laban, there's too much ego associated with that statement. And Steve, this devout Mormon guy, yells down the phone at me, and he goes, Laban, you tell that person to fuck off. Do you know who I am? And I'm all evangelical at this point.
Yeah.
Because I've never heard anyone speak like that before. I'm like, who are you, Steve? He goes, I'm the best coach in the world. And it was in that moment that this idea of this courage coach kind of came to fruition. And I got off that phone call with Steve. And I called a friend of mine, Chris Doris, who was coached by Steve Hardison. Chris Doris is known as the mental toughness coach. Amazing guy. He's the guy in charge of all of Salesforce's mental skills. He used to coach pro golfers and NFL stars, that kind of thing. And I rang him up and I said, hey, Chris, I was just talking to Steve Hardison. He goes, what do you mean? And I go, I was just talking to Steve Hardison. He goes, I don't understand. You just did what? And I go, yeah, I just had a great chat with Steve for like 15 minutes. He goes, do you have any idea of the gift of courage you have to bring to the world? And it was in that moment that the world's best courage coach came about. And at that time, I was destitute. Anna had to go back to Russia for some urgent family business. And I said, Chris, I need some help. Like, I need to generate some money.
Yeah.
And him and I worked together for about 4 hours to come up with this idea. And the idea was to cold call the CEOs of the biggest companies on planet Earth and read this declaration. And I started out, I rang the CEO of Zoom, Eric Yang, and the language barrier wasn't great and blah, blah, blah. A few other things happened. It was getting late in the United States. So I started ringing Australia. And I search on the internet, on LinkedIn, and I find the CEO of Hodges Real Estate, this guy, Tony Zaka. And Hodges Real Estate is the oldest real estate company in Victoria, in Australia. And I ring this number, and Tony picks up the phone and says, good day, Tony speaking. And I go, Tony Zaka? He goes, yes, it is. I said, Tony Zaka, it's Laban Ditchburn from Melbourne here. How are you? He goes, oh, hi, Laban. How can I help? I said, Tony, today's your lucky day. He laughs. He goes, why is it my lucky day, Laban? I said, because, Tony, I'm the world's best courage coach. And I teach your people how to take bold, massive, and courageous action so that they can facilitate their own miraculous outcomes. That outrageous cold call lasted 15 minutes and resulted in him inviting me back the following Wednesday, and we're still in lockdown, so this is all virtual, to present and pitch for training and coaching for his organization. No website, no credentials, nothing. We get on this call the following Wednesday, and what Steve Hardison says is that the power is in the listener. So I remembered that, and I asked this guy one very specific question about the direction he wanted to take the business. And he said, I want to go from good to great. And I was like, right. And he spoke for 45 minutes, and I just listened. And he told me everything that I needed to know about how I could help this organization. And he finished, and I said, Tony, what about becoming the best real estate company in Victoria? And he looks at me and he looks up and kind of left. He starts thinking about it. He goes, and I said, well, what about being the best real estate company in Australia? And now he's really getting into the swing of things, right? He can see possibility for himself for the first time.
Yeah.
And I said, Tony, you do realize that in order for you to have the best real estate company in Australia, you need to be the best real estate CEO in Australia. Now he's really getting into it. 30 seconds later, he's stretched, standing up with his arms punched in the air, yelling at the top of his lungs on this Zoom call, which I recorded. I'm the best real estate CEO in the world.
He's doing this on the...
He's doing this on the Zoom.
No
and his
way.
family are in the back, like in the other room, like who knows what's going on. But on that call, I pitched $250,000 worth of training and coaching for a 3-month thing. Now, I was $100 an hour as a coach back then.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't laugh at me. He didn't hang up on me. He didn't tell me to F off. He just sat there and he said, Laban, he said, I physically do not have the liquid to invest in that right now, but let me see what I can do. And it was in that moment that I realized the power of our own declarations and how people respond when we take ownership for something as dramatic as that. And I know this might be a hard message for people in Australia and New Zealand and England to hear because of the tall poppy syndrome that exists. This works a lot better in the United States, by the way. but I promise you it's not an ego statement at all. It's every day I wake up and I'm like, how would the world's best courage coach conduct himself? Because until they have a world's best courage coach competition held out of Nevada, I can take ownership for that, and there can be multiple people. The advice that I give people when I'm coaching and for people that want to take on a declaration like this, it has to be non-quantifiable and intangible. Because if you say, I'm the world's best hairdresser, they actually have Schwarzkopf competitions for that kind of thing.
Yeah, someone's got that trophy.
Someone's got it already. So until they can figure it out, and it doesn't have to make any sense to you, but if you really resonate with this message, why wouldn't you be the best? And why would you aim to be second? If I called Tony Zucker and said, Tony, today's your lucky day, why is that, Laban? Because I'm the third best courage coach. You'd be like, who's this joker?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
As the proclaimed world's best courage coach, some of the feedback that I've got from my community, and I actually went and asked them and polled them in the Facebook group when we're going to do some episodes. Out of these three, what would you prefer to choose? And it was, we asked them around, do you want to know about Investing 101 and how to set up your future for financial freedom? Do you want to kind of understand more about overcoming self-limiting beliefs? And all of these got a pretty even mix, but I think after reading your book and the stories that you can tell, this overcoming self-limiting beliefs part, I think you can really speak to and talk to us about that exercise and the running and stuff, because what you did there was very rapid, very extreme. Why did you go down that path, and how do you overcome shit? I think that's what we really want to get to our audience is no one can overcome it. I heard Stephen Bartlett say at his roadshow that he did. Everyone looks for confidence before they can take action, but you need to take action in order to get confidence.
Yeah.
Let's start with the running. What was the first one and why?
So my background was addiction as a result of childhood divorce and the associated dysfunction. But I also abused my body with improper food and drugs and alcohol for a long time. And I suffered from this incurable autoimmune disease, which is called GERD. It's an acronym for gastrointestinal reflux disorder. And I had it for 17 years. And I was on drugs that prevented my stomach from producing stomach acid to stop the heartburn, which sounds logical, but it's actually really destructive and linked to all kinds of issues. And I was told it was issue-free and they've been doing it for 30 years and then it's incurable. You're going to have to take this medication. And I watched one interview on Joe Rogan in 2016 with a functional medicine guy called Chris Kresser, Dr. Chris Kresser. He's talking about the link between gluten intolerance and heartburn. And I was like, that can't be that simple. 4 days later, it's gone. And I was like, I was pissed. I was like, what else are these motherfuckers wrong about? And so I went down the rabbit hole of like, just, I spoke about how many books I've read. That excludes all the podcasts that I've listened to, the YouTube, and the articles that I've read, that kind of thing as well. So I've consumed, to this point, tens of thousands of hours, multiple PhDs worth of information to self-educate. And I learned that adopting a animal-based diet was going to be very good for a lot of the symptoms that I had. And then over the course of 2 years, I lost 60 pounds of body fat and put on 30 pounds of muscle, which is unheard of in the bodybuilding community unless you're on the juice, which I'm a completely natural athlete and I hardly even take any supplementation apart from like electrolytes and, salt and potassium, magnesium, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I went from like 30% body fat, I got down to 8% body fat, like healthily, and I was jacked. And I had this huge breakthrough moment with my mum, which is part of the disagreement that we're talking about earlier, back in 2018. And I forgave her on Mother's Day and sent her this big forgiveness text message. And as soon as I sent it, I had this huge guttural release and I just wept and wept for like an hour, like real unattractive wailing. And then when I finished that, I was like, I want to run. And to that point, I'd run 5Ks was the furthest I'd ever run. And I ran 26 kilometers that day.
So from zero?
From 5 to was the furthest I'd ever run.
Yeah.
And then that day I did like 6 laps of the Tan in Melbourne.
Okay.
If anyone knows that area. And the only reason I stopped is because I was real hungry. And I got home and I was like, I want to do more. I did 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 pull-ups over a few different sets. And I was like, I'm going to run a marathon. So I signed up for the next available marathon, which was the Traralgon Marathon, which was in 2 weeks, and did it in 3 hours 56, which is 42.2 Ks. And I'm like, I still want more. So I signed up for the Surf Coast Century, which is a 100-kilometer trail run, which was in September of that year. But I needed a longer run to build up some strength in my legs. So I did the Tan Ultra, which is 50 kilometers. That was 8 weeks after I did the marathon. So I did that, the 50K, and then the 100, and then attempted another 100 4 weeks after I did the first 100 up here in Queensland.
Yeah.
But I injured myself. I did my iliotibial band on the 100K and had to limp the last 50 kilometers. So it took me 7.5 hours to run 50 Ks, and then a total run time of 19 hours to limp the last 50 Ks.
So you say, I wanted more. Why?
I don't know. What I think happened, and this makes sense when you start to understand mitochondria and when you feed the body what it actually wants. Like I was eating 3 massive meals a day, which are eggs and steak and bacon and, sausages, these kind of things. Very little refined stuff, hardly any sugar. And my body just thrived. And I had this energy and a clarity. And it makes sense when you start burning body fat as your primary fuel source, because I was in a very low carbohydrate deficit. So, and when you burn your body fat, your brain fog tends to disappear, and your cognitive ability and your ability to reason and articulate goes through the roof. And most people never get to experience this because they are having 8 small meals a day and there's plenty of carbohydrates in their protein shake that's full of crap and all this other stuff. And my whole pursuit in life, Ben, is I just want to know the truth so I can make an informed decision. I don't care if I need to eat bufo frog as my primary fuel source for me to thrive. That's what I'll do. I don't care what it is. But I've realized that we've been lied to about so much of the stuff. Then I implemented it, and I really, truly attribute the dietary shift to the success of the addiction recovery, because I never had to rely on 12-step. And I think there's a place for people for 12-step. I don't think it's a bad thing. But, you talk about the negative self-talk component. Why would you go to a meeting for the rest of your life and the first thing you say is, hi, my name's Laban and I'm an alcoholic? Why would you reaffirm that? You're not. Not. And this was made very apparent when I interviewed Jack Canfield, who is the co-author for Chicken Soup for the Soul, and he wrote Success Principles, and a very, very well-known guy. And he was telling me about what you can do, and you can get a swear jar at home. Instead of putting money in for profanity, you put it in for negative self-talk. And you do that for 30 days. That's what I did. And then all of a sudden, I realized how poorly I used to speak about myself. And so now you will not hear me use negative self-talk without context. The only reference I've made today, as best of my knowledge, is the total unmitigated financial disaster in 2019. But I'm doing that to give you an idea of how much it sucked, not because I believe that.
Yeah.
And then once you do that, you start to become conscious of how people in your life speak. And I was mortified to realize that these people in my life were the most negative people ever. They had been the whole time, but I didn't realize. And so understanding that allowed me to make even more rigid boundary setting decisions about, holy shit, I'm not going to allow this person in my life. They're just negative Nelly. Why would I do that? Incidentally, the people that appreciate that positive self-talk and the elimination of negative self-talk the most, coincidentally or not, are the most successful people that I've ever met in my entire life. And I'm not just talking about the dollars and cents.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the trifecta: health, wealth, and mother flipping relationships.
Yeah. It is in relation to the 12 steps, and it's one of my favorite YouTube TED Talks. And he says that the actual values, and I've spoken about this in a previous episode, and I really resonate with it, keen to get your thoughts, but that the values for these addicts and everything are these 3 things, which is to be authentic, do uncomfortable work, and surrender the outcome. And he's taken that from his whole addiction, and he said, I'm still an addict. So I still have to focus every day on not being an addict, but I have applied these 3 things into my business, into my work life, into my relationship with massive positive outcomes. So your thoughts there on that? Like,
I am a huge fan of anything that helps people through that particular journey. For me, I love the freedom that is afforded being able to get married in Las Vegas like we did in 2022. And we stayed at the Virgin Hotel and were offered gambling comps and free booze. And none of it holds any dominion over me because my relationship with it, I've killed any desire to want to escape. So I have a lot of empathy for people that still need, like they still think that they're an addict. And like I've even attended Overeaters Anonymous virtually during COVID.
yeah,
And there was one guy that was attending 5 meetings a week and he'd been going for 20 years. And I'm like, this guy's just become addicted to the meetings and he's still binging
yeah,
and still purging. Like it's not working. So for me, I would rather, and I'm blessed that I was able to figure this out, reverse engineer the things that were causing me to want to escape by implementing those exact same traits that the 12-step implement, which these are just principles, by the way.
They are,
So that's why it works.
yeah.
And then surrendering to, I don't want this to hold dominion over me anymore. And so now I can focus on and exist in society with all the temptations around me. I mean, my wife and I just came back from living in Medellin in Colombia for the last 5 months. Asked me how much cocaine I did. None. I have no interest. My life is way more rewarding and way more fun being sober. And I get a way better high that doesn't come with a hangover by being able to be authentic and speak my truth and do all these other things and come on amazing podcasts like Fired Up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And just a quick moment as well. If you're listening to this for the first time or you're a repeat listener, go out and subscribe and review this because organic reviews help organic people find this that wouldn't have found it. And Ben's doing amazing work. He's doing the work. So go and do the needful.
Appreciate that. One last question before we're going to get into we do the Fired Up rapid fire questions at the end. They're just 4. You can answer them quick, short, and sweet. But I'm really trying to enforce through this channel and this group is for people to take that first step. Just start that, and then you'll find that you can do the next part. If you could give our listeners a challenge for the next 30 days to make a change in their life, to get the courage to start making things happen, what would that be?
Have you ever heard the phrase start now and optimize later?
No.
So I live by this because once and Simon Sinek was famous for quoting this. He says, when the why becomes clear, the how becomes easy. I'm pretty sure it's Simon Sinek, right? What I do, if you're asking for a tangible 30-day challenge,
Yeah.
if say you're married and you're a woman, like have a bet, which is ironic coming from the former degenerate gambler here. Have a bet with like an amount that hurts, whether it be $250, $500 or $5,000, depending on your circumstance, where you're going to commit to something for 30 days. And if you cheat or regress, you have to pay that money to your husband or a friend. And I've used this strategy with people that I've coached in the past around doing the carnivore diet, for example, right? Even the most wealthy people don't want to pay out money because they couldn't keep their mouth shut or insert whatever challenge here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made a lot easier because if you say, oh, I'm on a diet, and you go to someone's house for a barbecue, they go on, have a glass of champagne or whatever. But if you say, if I put that in my mouth, it's going to cost $5,000, they're on board with you. They're like, oh, no, let me support you with whatever it might be for you. So for me, that's been a very effective thing. So implement that. Find someone that you can keep you accountable and have a financial incentive to not cheat. And then once you get to 30 days, you're almost at habit forming stage. Extend it out by another month if you need to with whatever the decision is. Yeah.
So you're saying, so it's one thing and find the big one thing or the thing that you most want to take a
I'll give you an
change it.
example. Give you an example, right? Let's say like you're doing 90 days sober at the moment, right? How far through are you?
15.
Right? 15. Oh, 15 days. It's like, it's a brilliant start if you understand where you came from, right? If you want to do 30 days booze free and you don't have the willpower, say to a friend, if I fall off the wagon, I have to pay you $1,000. Put it in writing. And it's easy. Hey, that's going to cost me $1,000. And then it's like there's pain associated to it that you wouldn't ordinarily have. And then all of a sudden, because it's 30 days, you start to feel better. And you're like, what is this thing in the morning that I enjoy? And I'm not like wanting to eat 2-minute noodles and poisoning my body with this other stuff. And so start now and optimize later and just find little hacks to make it work.
To do it. The only reason I'm doing the 90 days is because I did the 30 days. Because when I did the 30 days, it wasn't as hard as I thought, day by day, step by step. And throughout that 30 days, feeling better, feeling clearer, feeling more productive and stuff. So then I was like, let's do the 90. And there's two parts to that for me. One is like I'm always setting challenges and goals. And it's like, when with the exercise and stuff, get to the 5K, you got to do the 10. You said you'd do the 10. You have to commit to the promise you've made to yourself. And it's interesting to say, like, put a bet on with someone. Like, if I bet myself, I can easily kind of keep that under the table. But I do like the idea, and I think you guys can actually take this. Put that bet on with your partner or your friend around sticking to that commitment, because now you've put that pain point there. Like you say, if you say to someone, hey, that glass of champagne is going to cost me $5,000, they're going to be like, we don't want to do that to you. Cool. I like that. So 30-day challenge, write down the biggest pain, make that bet, and we'll also get some feedback in the group and on the channel to see how you've gone with it. 4 rapid-fire questions, Laban. Best life advice you've received and why?
What people think of me is none of my spiritual business. And why? Because it ain't.
Awesome. Routines or discipline that got you where you are today?
Prioritizing the food that goes in my body and moving my body.
Quote or motto that you live by?
If the milk turns out, nah. Ask for help, not so that you appear weak, but so that you can remain strong and keep asking for help until you get it.
Number 1 book recommendation that is not your own.
For the men out there, read Dr. Robert Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy. It will transform your existing relationships and help you meet the woman of your dreams if you haven't met one already.
Thank you. Thank you, Laban. An absolute pleasure, mate. It's so good to see you. And get the book, Bet on You. I highly encourage you to get the audio book because it is Laban's voice. He tells a great story. It is funny. It is amazing. It is certainly someone who has taken a fired up approach and has absolutely made it happen. Can't wait to follow you from the sidelines and cheer for your success from here, mate. Well done.
I appreciate you, Ben. Thanks,
All right.
brother.
Take care. Cool. If you are looking to follow Laban, and you fucking absolutely should, you can find him where? Where's the socials?
If you just punch Laban Ditchburn into your favorite browser, there's only one of me on planet Earth. So whatever comes up, that's the universe's way of saying, I want you to watch this.
Guys, in the links below, you'll be able to get a copy of Laban's book, Bet on You. It is absolutely outstanding. I think it probably takes audiobook-wise about 4 hours.
It's 3 hours and 56, which is exactly how long my marathon took.
No way.
True story, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Total coincidence.
Also, a link to Laban's podcast as well. Be your own superhero. We know we keep pushing this narrative with you guys, but you can absolutely do it by making small changes and then following through and seeking out the help and guidance from people who have done that before. In future episodes, we will be hopefully bringing Laban back in maybe a year's time to see what's going on. And also let us know if you agree or disagree with what we've spoken about today and how we can make future episodes better for you. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this episode, then subscribe on YouTube or follow our podcast on your favorite platform. We drop a new episode every week. You'll be doing us a massive favor. If you know someone that would benefit from listening to this, then share it with them. You'll be doing them a massive favor. And if you want the tips, tools, and resources to support you on this journey, then join our exclusive Facebook community and follow our socials. You'll be doing yourself a massive favor.